The coffee shop wasn't even good. The tables were uneven, the espresso machine hissed too loud, and the same 3 songs played on loop. Still, I kept coming back. Habit, maybe? Or the way the place felt suspended from time, like no one there had anywhere more important to be. I was half watching the rain through the window when she walked in. Not rushed, not late, just steady. A woman in her 40s, maybe older, hair pulled back in a way that looked casual but wasn't. She ordered without looking at the menu, her voice low, certain. The barista knew her drink, something with oat milk, and slid it across without asking her name. She sat one table away from mine. Not next to me, but close enough that the air shifted. I noticed her hands first. Not polished, not manicured, practical hands. She slipped off her ring, almost absently, before wrapping them around her mug. I must have looked too long, because when her eyes lifted, they caught mine. She didn't smile. Just held the gaze a second too long before looking back at her cup. I glanced at my phone, pretending something had lit up. Nothing had. My notifications were empty except for a draft text to someone I hadn't sent in months. "How are you?" Still sitting unsent, like I didn't have the nerve to finish it. "Cold morning," she said, her voice carrying just enough for me to know she was talking to me. "Yeah." My reply came too fast. I tried to correct myself, softer this time. "Yeah, colder than it looks." She gave a small sound, half a laugh, half an exhale, and went back to stirring her drink. Minutes passed. The rain slowed. The song playing cut off mid-chorus before starting again from the top. "You're here a lot," she said, not looking at me. I hesitated, not sure if she was accusing me or observing. "Yeah, I guess so. Works nearby." That wasn't true. My job was across town. But she just nodded like she believed me. She folded her napkins slowly, precise corners, like it mattered. I found myself flicking my eyes toward her hands each time they moved. "What about you?" I asked. "Divorce attorney's office around the corner," she said simply, almost like she'd rehearsed the answer for curious strangers. Then, after a pause, "I'm not the lawyer. Just paperwork." I nodded, though she wasn't looking for understanding. She seemed like someone who rarely needed it. Silence settled again, the kind that didn't press down but stretched out, leaving room. I thought about asking her name, but it felt too forward, like stepping over a line we hadn't drawn yet. Instead, I watched the condensation roll down her glass, the way she touched it absent-mindedly, fingertips dragging lines through the wet surface. When she stood to leave, she adjusted her coat, slipped the ring back on. She lingered by the door, looking out at the lighter sky, then back at me. "See you around," she said, as if it was already decided. I nodded, but by the time I found words, she was gone. I sat there longer than I meant to, staring at the empty chair. My phone buzzed once, just a system notification. But for a split second, I thought it might be something else. A text, an invitation, a mistake in my favor. Instead, just silence. Still, when I left, I caught myself glancing toward the corner she mentioned. The divorce attorney's office. Like some part of me already knew this wasn't the last time I ran into her again the following week, though "ran into" might be too casual a phrase. Truth was, I lingered in the coffee shop longer than I needed, scrolling aimlessly, half waiting. She arrived later than before, hair damp from the mist outside, scarf tucked unevenly around her neck. She spotted me right away and, instead of choosing the table near mine, she slid into the chair across from me. "Your table's always free," she said, as if she'd been keeping track. I tried to laugh, but it came out uneven. "Perks of being predictable, I guess." The barista dropped off her drink and, for some reason, an extra mug. She pushed it toward me. "It's too hot. You can share if you don't mind." I didn't. We passed the cup back and forth, her lipstick leaving faint traces on the rim. She didn't seem to care, and that small indifference felt more intimate than anything I'd experienced in months. At one point, she leaned back, watching the window like she was seeing something far away. "I used to come here with my husband," she said suddenly. Then softer. Before. I nodded, unsure what to do with that truth. She didn't offer more, and I didn't ask. Inside, though, something twisted. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. More the sharp reminder that I was stepping into someone else's half-closed life. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it. Instead, I found myself imagining scenarios I had no right to imagine: what her house looked like, what her evenings were like, how her laugh would sound if she let it out fully. The silence stretched, and I filled it clumsily. I don't know why I come here so much. It's not even good coffee. She turned to me then, eyes steady. Maybe it's not about the coffee. I swallowed, looked down at the cup between us. Her fingers brushed mine as she reached for it. Accidental, probably. Still, the warmth of it lingered long after. For a while we didn't talk. Just sat there, sharing heat from a mug, letting the hum of the cafe fill the spaces we couldn't. Eventually she stood. Adjusted her scarf again, tugged her sleeves down. You're young, she said not unkindly. Almost like she was reminding herself. Too young? I asked before I could stop myself. Her smile was quick, almost invisible. Maybe just enough to still matter. And then she was gone again, leaving me with the dregs of lukewarm tea, my reflection caught in the window. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The third time wasn't planned. I was leaving the shop when she stepped out of the attorney's office, papers clutched to her chest. She spotted me before I could decide whether to wave or keep walking. You're early today, she said, falling into step beside me. Got off work. I lied again. I don't know why. We walked without a plan. Side streets, wet leaves sticking to the pavement. She kept glancing at the sky like it might break open. At one point, she adjusted the folder in her arms and sighed. You ever notice how the worst news always comes in plain envelopes? I wanted to ask what was inside, but her voice had the weight of someone who didn't want the question. So I just nodded. We ended up back at the cafe. Crowded this time. No empty tables except one in the corner. We sat too close, shoulders brushing each time someone squeezed past. She set the folder down, pressed her fingers to her temple. I noticed she hadn't put her ring back on today. You okay? I asked. Headache, she said. Then, after a pause, and you keep looking at me like I should say more. I froze, heat rising to my face. Sorry. I didn't, it's fine. She waved it off, but her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. The barista brought her drink, and another for me without asking. He gave me a look, half amusement, half curiosity. Like he noticed something I hadn't meant to show. She caught it too. Her lips pressed tight, as if holding something back. For a while we didn't talk. Just the scrape of her spoon, the hum of voices around us. I found myself staring at her hands again, the way they wrapped around the cup, the way her thumb rubbed the handle absent-mindedly. I thought about reaching across the table. Just to steady her hand. Just to see if it felt the way I imagined. Instead, she leaned in slightly, her shoulder almost brushing mine. You remind me. She stopped, shook her head. Never mind. What? Her gaze flicked to my mouth, then away. It's nothing. The room felt too small then. Too bright. Every sound sharp, every silence louder. Someone from her office walked in, an older man in a gray suit. He nodded at her, then at me. She straightened instantly, pulling the folder closer, posture rigid. When he left with his coffee, she let out a slow breath. I should. She started, but didn't finish. Yeah, I said, though I didn't move either. Her hand brushed mine when she reached for the folder. Not an accident this time. She didn't pull away right away. For a second, just a second, it felt like everything else in the cafe had gone quiet. And then she let go. See you, she said, standing. I almost followed. Almost. But instead I sat there, hands still warm from where hers had been, heart caught somewhere between what nearly happened and what hadn't doubted happened on a Tuesday evening, after the rain had stopped but the streets still glistened like mirrors. I wasn't supposed to see her that day. I was walking back from the bus stop when I noticed her on the bench near the square, coat folded over her lap, staring at nothing. I almost walked past. Almost. Instead, I sat down. A few feet away, enough space to pretend it was casual. She glanced at me, tired smile tugging at her mouth. "Do you always appear when I'm trying to disappear?" "Bad timing," I said. "Or good," she murmured, eyes still fixed ahead. The square was quiet, just the faint hum of traffic, a child dragging a scooter across the pavement. She exhaled slowly, fingers twisting her scarf. "My ex, he's bringing someone new to the hearing," she said, almost flatly. "You'd think I wouldn't care anymore. But—" She didn't finish. I waited. Not because I had anything wise to say, but because she looked like no one else ever waited long enough. "You're too young to understand this kind of thing," she added after a moment. "Try me." My voice came out softer than I meant. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp, almost accusing. "That's the problem. You'd try. And it would cost you." I wanted to say it wouldn't. That it already had, in some way I couldn't measure. But I just looked down, tracing the lines on the bench with my thumb. "Do you ever—" She stopped, shook her head, laughed once, dry, self-directed. "Never mind. Say it," I said before I could think better of it. Her jaw tightened. She shifted slightly closer, the air between us warm with everything unsaid. "Do you ever feel like someone sees you, really sees you, when you shouldn't let them?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because in that moment, I knew she was talking about me. A long silence followed. I heard her swallow. My pulse beat too loud in my ears. Finally, she said, almost whispering, "If I keep letting this happen, I won't stop it next time." The words hit harder than if she'd touched me. I turned to her, really looked, at the faint creases near her eyes, the way her hands stilled like she'd surprised herself by saying it. I wanted to reach for her. To close the space. To prove her right. Instead, I stayed frozen. She let out a breath, slow, deliberate, as if she just pushed something heavy off her chest. Then she stood, adjusting her coat. Her eyes lingered on me, steady, almost staring. "Do you want that?" she asked. And then silence. The question hung between us, heavier than anything either of us had said before. The next time I went to the cafe, her chair was empty. It shouldn't have mattered. People miss days. Schedules shift. Still, I caught myself waiting longer than usual, fingers drumming on the cup, eyes flicking to the door each time it opened. She didn't come. The day after, same thing. By the third, I stopped pretending I was there for the coffee. When she finally appeared, it wasn't alone. A teenage girl trailed behind her, headphones around her neck, scrolling her phone. Her daughter. I realized it instantly, the resemblance, the sharpness in her eyes, the way she rolled them when her mother ordered too slowly. I froze, unsure if I should wave. She noticed me but gave no sign, just tightened her scarf and kept walking, guiding her daughter to a table farther away. Our eyes met once, briefly. Hers said everything at once, "Not now, not here, not like this." I stayed until they left, pretending to read emails that weren't there. That night, I drafted a message. Just a simple, "Are you okay?" I stared at it until the screen dimmed, then locked my phone without sending. The silence stretched into days. When I finally saw her again, it was on the street near her office. She didn't stop. Just slowed enough to murmur, "You shouldn't wait for me." I almost laughed. I wasn't. She gave me a look that cut through the lie, then walked on, heels sharp against the pavement. I wanted to follow, to ask what changed. But something in her pace said she needed the distance. That night, I replayed every glance, every brush of her hand, every pause. Trying to figure out if I'd misread all of it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. The cafe still smelled of burnt beans and too sweet syrup. Her table stayed empty for a week, maybe longer. I stopped counting. One morning I took the long way to work, passing her office. She was outside, speaking with the man in the gray suit. Her laugh was careful, practiced. She touched his arm lightly as they walked back in together. I kept moving, never slowing, though my chest felt hollow. That night, my phone lit up with another draft I didn't send. Do you ever think about that day on the bench? The cursor blinked against the empty white screen until I shut it off. I didn't knock on her door. I didn't press send. The seat across from me in the cafe stayed open. It wasn't the cafe this time. It was her doorstep. I hadn't planned to go. I'd walked past her street more than once, always convincing myself not to. But that evening, something pulled me there. Maybe it was the unsent messages stacked like stones on my phone. Maybe it was the way silence had begun to feel heavier than words. Her porch light was on. She opened the door before I even knocked, as if she'd been expecting someone, or maybe just checking the night air. We froze when our eyes met. "You shouldn't be here," she said, but there was no edge in her voice. Just tiredness. "I know," I answered. My throat felt dry. But I didn't want to keep not saying anything. She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, like she needed something solid to hold her up. "And what exactly is it you're not saying?" For a moment I thought I'd lose my nerve. The words felt stuck, too heavy to push out. "That day on the bench," I managed finally. "When you said you wouldn't stop it next time. I keep thinking about that." Her jaw tightened. She looked past me, down the street, like she hoped for a distraction. But nothing came. "You don't understand what you're asking for," she whispered. "Then explain it to me," I said. Her laugh was quiet, humorless. "You're too young. You should be chasing someone who doesn't come with all this." She gestured vaguely toward herself, toward the house, toward some invisible history hanging in the air. "I don't care," I said. And it sounded naive even to me, but it was true in the way only something half-formed but undeniable can be. We stood in silence. The world outside carried on, distant traffic, a dog barking 2 houses down. Finally, she uncrossed her arms, let them fall at her sides. "You make me feel seen," she admitted, so soft I almost missed it. "And that terrifies me." I took a half-step closer, not enough to touch. "It scares me too." Her eyes closed briefly, then opened again, glassy but steady. "If I let this happen, it changes everything. For both of us." "I know." For a long moment, neither of us moved. The air between us was thick with everything we hadn't said over coffee cups, in silences, in glances too long. Then, slowly, she reached out. Her hand brushed mine, light, tentative, almost not a touch at all. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a declaration. It was just skin against skin, a small permission. "Okay," she said, voice breaking on the word. And in that single syllable, I felt both the risk and the relief. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic confession, no sudden shift. Just small changes that slowly added up. A text sent instead of left unsent. A coffee shared without hesitation. A bench where silence didn't feel like waiting anymore. Weeks turned into months. The cafe stopped feeling like neutral ground and more like theirs. Some mornings, 8:47 on the dot, she'd already be there, her scarf draped over the back of the chair, thermos of tea in hand. I'd walk in with my black coffee, pretending it was coincidence. She never called me on it. We didn't name what we were. Maybe that's what made it real. Naming things meant defining them, boxing them in. What we had was simpler, showing up, over and over, even when it would have been easier not to. Her daughter spotted me once, walking out with us. She gave me the kind of look teenagers reserve for mysteries they don't have time to solve. Nothing more was said. We still had boundaries. She never let me walk her inside the house. I never asked. But on evenings when the world felt heavy, we'd sit on the porch steps, sharing the last of her tea, steam curling into the night. "I used to hate this place," she admitted once, glancing at her garden, the quiet street. Too quiet. Too much room to think. And now? I asked. She smiled faintly. Now it's bearable. That was her way of saying better. I thought back to the first time I saw her, slipping off her ring in that crowded cafe, eyes lowered but unflinching. How different it felt now, her hand resting openly on the table between us, no ring, no performance. Sometimes, when the silence stretched too long, I caught myself remembering the question she'd once asked me, "Do you want that?" I never answered then. I think she already knew. Now, there was no question. Just the way she'd pour her tea into a second cup without asking. The way she'd glance at the clock, then at me, as if measuring the day by my presence. It wasn't perfect. Some mornings she'd pull back, retreating into herself. Some evenings I'd wonder if I was enough. But somehow neither of us left. One night, sitting on that same bench in the square, she leaned against me, not much, just enough that I felt her weight. "Funny," she said softly. "This is where I almost ruined everything." "Or started it," I offered. She didn't answer, but her hand slipped into mine, warm and steady. And in that quiet, I realized something. Peace doesn't arrive with fireworks. It just settles in, like steam rising from a cup you've been sharing too long to count. I don't know if this is love in the way other people describe it. But it's ours. And that's enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?